Someone asks you a simple question. What are you planning
What are
for
you
your
doing
birthday
for
this
your
year?
birthday?
And you give them the most honest answer you have. Nothing special. Just another day. And the moment those words leave your mouth, you watch their face shift. The slight tilt of the head. The concern creeping in behind their eyes. Suddenly, you're the one with the problem. Your friends start checking in like something must be terribly wrong. Your family pushes back, telling you that you're being unnecessarily difficult. And society, well, society has decided that if you're not posting a curated photo with balloons and a caption about gratitude, you must be broken somewhere deep inside. But what if you're not broken at all? What if the people raising their eyebrows at you have simply never stopped to question why they do what they do? Psychologists have actually spent considerable time studying people who feel indifferent toward their own birthdays, and what they discovered is both surprising and deeply human. So before anyone decides there's something wrong with you, let's talk about what's actually going on inside the minds of people who genuinely don't need the celebration. There's a category of people who didn't choose indifference. It chose them. Back in 1967, psychologist Martin Seligman was running experiments that would change how we understand human behavior forever. What he discovered, he called learned helplessness. The basic idea is this: when a person experiences repeated disappointment over something they have no power to change, their brain eventually stops anticipating a positive outcome altogether. Not because they lack willpower, not because they're pessimistic by nature, but because the brain is fundamentally a prediction machine, and a smart prediction machine stops betting on outcomes that have never paid off. Now apply that to birthdays. Your brain's dopamine system, as neuroscientists have mapped out extensively, doesn't just respond to good things happening. It responds to the gap between what you expected and what actually occurred. Researchers studying reward circuitry found that the real chemical reaction happens in that space between anticipation and reality. So think about what happens to a child who expects the party, expects their friends to remember, expects to feel genuinely celebrated, and instead gets silence. Not once, not as a fluke, but year
What
after
are you
year,
doing
the
for your
expectation
birthday?
quietly
Not
outpacing
sure
the
yet.
reality every single time. Eventually, the brain does what it was designed to do. It recalibrates, it stops generating the anticipation that leads to the disappointment. The dopamine stops flowing toward that particular event. And what you're left with is a person who says, completely calmly, that their birthday doesn't matter to
What are you
them.
doing for
To
your birthday?
outsiders, that calm sounds like maturity or stoicism. But sometimes it's something quieter and more complicated than that. It's the sound of someone who learned through accumulated experience that hoping for that one day hurt more than simply letting it pass. When you meet someone like this and they tell you it's just another day, understand that sentence didn't emerge from nowhere. It was constructed carefully over years, one quiet disappointment at a time. The calm in their voice isn't coldness. It's the result of a brain that finally stopped bracing for impact by deciding there was nothing to brace for. Now here's a completely different story. There are people who don't celebrate their birthday not because of any emotional history, but because they genuinely, almost bafflingly, forget it's happening. Not as avoidance, not as a coping strategy. Their brain simply filed the date somewhere beneath 17 more pressing concerns. Psychologists have a term for this kind of relationship with time: time blindness. It's particularly common among people whose minds are perpetually absorbed in projects, goals, creative work, or the relentless momentum of a life that demands constant attention. 2. When you're operating at that level of cognitive engagement, weeks blur into each other. Dates stop being landmarks and start feeling arbitrary. Your calendar becomes less a meaningful guide and more a vague suggestion you occasionally glance at. These people aren't suppressing anything. They're not avoiding the emotional weight of aging or quietly grieving the passage of another year. They're just genuinely occupied. Their brain assessed the birthday as non-urgent and filed it accordingly, right alongside the dentist appointment they've rescheduled 3 times and the home project that's been almost done for 4 months. This
What are you
isn't a
doing for your
character flaw.
birthday?
It's what happens when someone's internal compass is pointed so consistently toward what they're building that everything else, including the day they were born, becomes background noise. Interestingly, these people often aren't neglecting themselves in other ways. They're frequently the ones most invested in their work, their relationships, their craft. They care deeply about many things. Their birthday just didn't make the short list this particular year, or the last several years. And somehow, that doesn't seem to bother them much at all. Then there's a third group, and this is where it gets psychologically fascinating. These are the people who didn't forget. They're not carrying old wounds. They looked at the entire cultural ritual of birthday celebration, examined it honestly, and arrived at a simple conclusion. They're fine without it. Not performatively fine. Not pretending to be fine while secretly hoping someone shows up with a cake. Actually, genuinely, unremarkably fine. Psychologists Richard Ryan and Edward Desai spent decades developing what they call self-determination theory, and one of their most significant findings is this. The people who demonstrate the strongest psychological well-being are consistently those whose sense of self-worth and happiness comes from internal sources rather than external validation, not from events, not from rituals, not from other people gathering to confirm that they matter on a particular day of the year. This connects to something researcher Philip Brickman identified years ago called the hedonic treadmill. The idea is that humans tend to return to a relatively stable emotional baseline regardless of positive or negative events. You get the party, you feel wonderful for a day, and then you're back to exactly where you started, already thinking about next year. Some people recognize this cycle intuitively. They've noticed that the build-up to a celebration is often more emotionally charged than the event itself, and that the aftermath frequently carries a faint but recognizable disappointment, and so they step off the treadmill entirely. What's striking about people in this group is that they've figured out something most people spend their entire lives chasing. They found a way to feel complete on an ordinary Wednesday in the middle of February with nothing special on the calendar. No milestone, no applause, no external confirmation required. They stopped waiting for one designated day per year to feel that their existence has meaning and started building that sense of meaning into the regular fabric of their lives. Here's what makes this threatening to other people. When someone genuinely doesn't need a birthday celebration, it quietly challenges the assumption that everyone operates the same way. That celebration is a universal need. That wanting the attention and the cake and the fuss is simply what humans do. People who've already answered that question for themselves without needing the answer confirmed by a crowd make others uncomfortable precisely because they've resolved something most people haven't yet. We've built a culture that treats celebration as proof of self-love, that assumes if you're not marking your existence loudly and publicly, something in your relationship with yourself must need fixing. But that framework has it backwards for a significant portion of the population. For some people, the truest form of self-respect is not requiring a performance to confirm their worth. It's already settled. It doesn't need annual renewal. The people who fall into that category aren't missing something that everyone else has. They've found something that most people are still looking for, which is a sense of wholeness that doesn't depend on the participation of others. Maybe you spent your last birthday completely alone. Not because you were forgotten, not because no one cared, but because the quiet of that day felt like exactly what you needed. Maybe the absence of noise finally felt like enough. If that's where you are, there's nothing to fix. There's no party you missed that would have completed you. You're part of a quieter group of people who stopped measuring their worth by the decibel level of their celebrations. And if something in this resonated differently, if there was a moment reading this where you felt a flicker of something unresolved, that's worth paying attention to too. Not to manufacture a birthday celebration you don't need, but because understanding yourself more clearly is always worth the effort, whatever that ends up meaning for you. Nothing was ever wrong with you. It was always something much more interesting than that.